We're going to start off here with a little calling all devs with your boy John Crew. This is our oldest video of today. We've got 3 different ones. First is our calling all devs, talking about ships. Second one will be our Invictus week of last year, question and answer. And third will be Invictus week of this year, question and answer. What this will do is give us a couple of looks at what they've said about certain ship features over the last 3 years, things like tracked beams, docking, and stuff like that. But also we're going to cover a little bit of there will be some overlap between features, but we'll mainly be covering a large swath of different features. Some of them we've seen, some of them we haven't. So this is the future of ship features. Thanks for coming, guys.
We've seen on ISC recently that work has begun on ship-to-ship docking, ship-to-station docking. Can you give us an update on both?
Yep, I sure can. We sort of think of them in 3 different ways, although the 2 are sort of under the same umbrella of ship-to-ship docking. So with ship-to-ship docking, there's 2 aspects we're looking at. So there's the direct hard attachment, which the prime example is the constellation of Merlin. And then there's ship-to-ship docking as a general, which is just any ship with a docking port connecting to another one. So first up, we're doing the Connie and Merlin hard docking. That is well underway. We've got to the point where the vehicle is attached to each other and you can get in and out. And we're now at the point of just sort of dealing with all the quirks of having 2 vehicles physically joined together intentionally, which has thrown up some weird physics problems that we're just working through.
Does the pilot have to pilot it in? Is there some kind of AR thing they've got to follow? It's completely automatic pilot?
It's not completely automatic. So you communicate to the target ship and they accept your request to dock, because if there was no sort of permission system, you could have anybody just randomly trying to dock with you. But once all that's all sorted out, you get a docking UI, which gives you an idea of how far off on each axis and roll you are. You line up all the symbols, you're in the right place, and then at the very last few meters, it takes over and automatically guides you in. So you have to do sort of 99% of the flying into it, and that's the very last bit where we have to ensure that you are orientated a very specific way to get, like you think about the Merlin, there is a bait animation sequence to get out the ship. So if you are 5 centimeters off to the left, you could end up getting out through the constellation out the other side. So we have to ensure you're a very specific position. So that's why there's automatic there.
Okay.
I'll come back to the bit of ship-to-ship docking. Ship-to-station docking is also well underway. We've got a fairly functional prototype at this point. We're just working out some of the last technical hurdles for that before we enter full production on that. So that's you taking your large ships and docking at any of the orbital stations or other places that have these large extended docking that I think you saw on ice. So that's the order of battle there, really. We're doing the Constellation Merlin docking first, then we're doing ship-to-station docking, and then at some point after that, we'll do the ship-to-ship. Purely because there's less of a need for that right now. The Constellation Merlin thing solves some tech problems for ship-to-station docking. Ship-to-station docking is needed for ships that are coming. Ship-to-ship is a sort of nice to have that we will do, but it's not as important as those other 2.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, I don't think the docking is very stable at the moment. That's probably more to do with the servers than the actual feature, though, because the feature did work when they brought it in, but almost no ships can actually dock. I think there's probably 3 ships in the game, 2. Hammerhead, 890 Jump. Are there any other ships besides those 2 that can dock to stations? It's kind of a bummer, honestly. The ship docking, I believe it was like, hey, we're going to do it for these first 2 ships, like he was saying, and then they were going to sort of spread it out from there, but I think they just don't have the time anymore to continue building docking into the other ships, because we're getting other ships in game that have docking ports, but they're not coming in with docking capabilities. Ship to station, ship to ship. Yeah, see, these were finished for 3.13, but they didn't expand after that.
A lot of people asking about the current status of physicalized things like physicalized armor, armor penetration, of course, and then updated SDF shields. So the tech features that surround vehicles. What can you tell us?
Yep, all those 3 things are in active production at the moment. They're not just for vehicles, especially the physicalized armor and penetration. That's also going to be applicable to actors and the FPS game. So again, we've got to a point where we're working on the initial parameters and tuning them in, making sure they're working as we expect before we start really putting all hands on it. Chris has been involved in it. While the physics guys are doing the groundwork. The vehicle and the actor teams are working.
Awesome. Thank you, Frazzled.
We need all these parameters. Please make them. The physics guys give us a build back and go, sure, that sort of works. This bit doesn't work. We need some more tuning here. So we're definitely working on it right now. How far through that process we are, it's hard to say until we get something that works across the system.
So it sounds like you're working on the prototype, the tech itself, as opposed to actively converting all the other ships, other ship to this. Okay.
We have our internal milestones for this, so it would be foolish to work on the tech alongside converting all the ships to it, because there's just so many ships. So we want to get a very small set of ships working first with it all, get them all playing nicely against each other, understand the tools we have to balance this now, because it moves away completely from weapon does 100 damage, ship has 1,000 health,
right.
10 shots equals death. Once we have a lot of that all on paper doesn't necessarily translate to fun gameplay once it's all implemented. So all the teams are working on the Physicalized armor and the armor penetration. So penetration will be a thing, over penetration will be a thing. SDF shields was the last thing there, I think. So in recent builds, all ships have SDFs generated for what will be their shield bubbles. The build process is now spitting them out for us. You will have seen the atmospheric reentry effect in 310 uses that as the basis. So 310 was a sort of precursor for rolling it out on a slightly simpler problem to solve, which is atmospheric entry effects sort of reacting to whatever angle your ship is. Right. Shields takes that to the next level. So core tech wise, it's pretty much there. And it's really now working with the VFX team and the VFX engineering team to make the shields look good, because we can't use any of the existing shield effects work. We have to recreate that from scratch, and that brings up a lot of not tech, but sort of visual gameplay. How do we make it look good at short range and far range without blinding players?
And then, of course, after you make it look good, then making it performative. It's finding that balance between, you can make it look amazing, and if you only had one ship to blow up, you were fine. But when it comes to giant melees of multiple ships, you need something that can scale and be performative and stuff. So a lot of work to be done there, I would imagine.
Yeah, certainly the initial stuff we've seen of the SDF shields internally looks very promising in terms of just how it looks and how it behaves, because one of the big things is when you lose a wing, the SDF adapts to losing that. You don't have this weird bubble floating out. So it's going to be a really nice change.
And we will, of course, be showing that to the community just as soon as we get closer to the more performative model.
Here's the SDF text, if you were interested in that, just describing what SDFs are. Assigned distance fields. They're basically just like sort of boundaries around a layer or a shape or something. Like you can use it for a lot of different technology, hit registration, shield effects like this. Atmospheric reentry uses that kind of stuff. So SDFs, assigned distance fields, are pretty useful, and they've been applying them to different things. This is a good one. A lot of people are interested in this. Different types of HUDs for different types of ships and UI. We actually have seen some examples of this. So we've seen the Drake HUDs in particular. Got a video of those. You can kind of see some of the examples they came up with. I don't think they're moving forward with any of these, but these are concepts of what they wanted to use for Drake. You can tell it's a little more angular, kind of more retro looking than something like Aegis. And then if you go to like an Aegis HUD and you see what the kind of stuff that they have planned for that, in comparison to something like this, which is rather simplified, Aegis is very much sleek and a little bit more busy. More lines, more details and stuff like that. Definitely a different look. So what he's going to talk about here is just the different ways that certain ship manufacturers will make their HUDs and how that progress is going along. So let's listen.
Aegis HUD or an Anvil HUD or something like that. we used to have some version of that, and then it kind of went away for an homogenization. Is that coming back?
Yep, that's coming back. In fact, we're actively working. I keep saying actively working, but it's true. It's true. The Aegis ships, or specifically the Gladius, for squadron reasons, is going to be getting a completely fresh HUD overall. And then I think we've also worked on an RSI styling. So all the manufacturers will be getting thematically themed HUDs for their ships, rather than just being the same HUD recolored. And that will apply to the MFDs as well. So the core functionality of the MFDs, when they're reworked, will be the same, but they'll just have a visual styling over it to make it feel like this is a Drake MFD versus an Aegis MFD.
And I would imagine this is part of why the ship HUD has been being converted into building blocks in recent patches. People have seen aspects of it being converted over, and it looks like what they had before, but it's being converted so that they can be modular, so that we can plug them into the RSI style, the Aegis style, the every other manufacturer's style.
Yeah, pretty much. It looks exactly the same as it did, but it is in fact all new. And now we have the ability to say style it by just applying one style sheet, much like web CSS. You can change the theme with a very simple change, which you can't do with Flash. You just have to remake the entire asset, and then you've got two things to update every time you want to add or change something.
For those who didn't know, they were using Flash, like the Adobe standard Flash, up until I think a lot of the stuff in the game actually still uses it. But that was one of the big things that held back UI up until probably a couple of years ago, is that all their stuff was using Flash, and Flash was discontinued. So like, not the best platform to build UI on. This video is from 2020, by the way.
So this new Aegis style, is it going to be different than we've seen before?
It's going to be very different to what's in game and what people have seen.
Cool. Well, we'll hang tight until we can show folks what it looks like. Another big popular question when it comes to vehicles or vehicle tech that folks have been waiting for: the ability to spawn smaller vehicles inside larger vehicles, whether that's the Pisces inside the Carrack, or a rover, Ursa rover inside a Constellation. We've been on a good trail so far. All these things in active development. Is this an active development?
It's sort of semi-active. We did some internal tests. We got it working. It's important to differentiate some of those things from like Connie and Merlin docking. That's almost like an entirely different thing.
Right.
Anything that is always going to be in a repeatable position every time you spawn the ship or customize the ship, like the Merlin and the Connie, will work. Things where you can change it out between multiple ships, we're looking at this. Ultimately, it still creates item ports that ships are attached to, but it does them dynamically. And for various technical reasons, we're sort of waiting for iCache to be more complete on this.
Remember iCache?
In other areas, and then we'll pick that up. Because if we try and shoehorn it in now, it'll just be throwaway code that iCache does out the box for it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. We run into that situation in a number of features. So all right. So that one's not in active development like the other things, just waiting on other dependencies.
Yes.
All right. So lastly, our last ship feature-related question has to do with the Hull C. We know that work was paused on it some time ago because it was waiting for other ship-related tech like the expandable, collapsible physics grids.
This should be interesting. I think he's probably going to say something here about why they can't put it in. And I'm wondering if he's going to say anything about the economy, because that would be telling, seeing the ship coming in with 3.20 with at least no obvious changes towards supply and demand and economy right now. Maybe they still have something up their sleeve, though.
At the ship-to-station docking, and I see similarities there. Are we getting closer to making this thing a reality?
We are. Like I say, the ship-to-station docking required animatable and multiple physics grids, which is what the Hull C requires. So we now have those. So that's one thing ticked off the list of Hull C dependencies. We still have a few more that we need to solve before we can release the ship, but we are able to actually progress internally now a bit more with it. Okay. So we need the ability for rooms to scale, like physics areas, because now you can have gravity in that central spine, but there'll be no air, so it's sort of equally as problematic for release.
Okay.
And that also will help all the level designers and the vehicle designers, because we want to unify the way all the rooms and shapes are made in the engine. At the moment, they're all sort of individual shapes, so a design has to go in and mark up a room for the air, an audio design has to go in and mark up a room for the audio volume, art have to go in and mark up a room for vis areas and portals to stop light coming in. So you want to all put them into one single feature that can support scaling, and then bam, that's the whole C part solved. The two other bits needed are a way to nicely trigger state machines on vehicles. So we sort of fudge it together at the moment by tying state changes into landing gear deployments. We need to split that out. That's scheduled for one of the vehicle teams. And then the last one is really the cargo system. Obviously carries thousands of units of cargo, and we only supply cargo in one SCU boxes at the moment. And that system needs to support not doing that. It needs to go, you've bought 4,000 units of Laranite, and here's 100 big boxes of it.
Right.
Because it will just cripple server performance. We've seen what happens when people go wild with Picos. This would be a whole lot worse than that.
And it's one of those things where the upcoming cargo decks in 3.11, while not the functionality it's in 3.11, but the cargo decks themselves are a platform for additional features, and where those will tie into being able to offload things like the Hull C and maybe even load them up to begin with.
Yeah, they're the perfectly designed places for that, because you don't want to take your Hull C. Well, you can't land with the cargo out, so there's very little point taking it down to the surface to land, but you will need to drop these off at orbital stations.
Right. So a lot of good progress being made. It's exciting to hear. It's exciting to hear about things like the physicalized armor and the armor penetration and the SDF shield.
Yeah, honestly, listening to what he had to say about the technology that they needed for the Hull C, we did see them like systemically take care of each of those problems over the last couple of years. It took a while, and I think the last hurdle was these boxes, the box sizes with the 32 SCU, but they did handle all those problems, and it's coming into the game. He didn't say anything about economy or anything, so I guess that wasn't necessarily a blocker, at least at this time. Not a blocker they felt like was in front of the Hull C.
And two different versions of ship docking, all in active development. So we hear so often about dependencies, and this has to wait for this, but to know that these things are actually in active motion now. The HUD styling for Aegis, another big thing. It's another big part of making these ships feel different and unique and bespoke. Lots of exciting stuff.
Let's listen to what they did have to say about AI blades, because that's a big one that a lot of people don't know about. I always forget about it even.
Something we're playing out at the moment is a lot of the precursor work. So anyone that was around before item 2.0 will have been familiar with like avionics motherboard items. Mm-hmm. So we're doing the sort of the planning for the revamp of those to go in the ships, and obviously a big part of that is all the blades you put in. So we obviously need to get the base computer item in first, and then we can work on the blades. But that's all being planned out in the very near future.
Wonder what very near was. But what he's saying there is important. There's like a whole computer component our ships are supposed to have that we haven't even touched on yet. You have your shield generator, gravity, power plant, whatever weapons there might be. All of those are different components on the ship. There's supposed to be a component specifically called your computer. You can actually find it in a lot of ship cockpits, like the Carrack. It's all over the back of the ship cockpit. I think it says avionics on it or something like that. And I think the AI blades would then be the subcomponents of the component being the computer.
Right, and just for folks who maybe have joined the project since the last time we mentioned AI blades, they are components that go into the vehicles that will allow you to automate the actions of the manned turrets.
Yeah, so the vehicles will all have computers, small ones, medium ones. They each have a varying amount of blade slots in there, and you can put all these different sort of blades in. Sort of the most popular one will be I want to slave a manned or remote turret to the pilot seat, and that would take up like one of the blade slots or more, perhaps.
AI server blades for spacecraft, because they are two very different things. And I think sometimes a lot of people use the term AI interchangeably to mean both. So let's start off with the differential there.
I'll take that one. No one else wants to jump on it.
It's all you, Dan.
No, they're both AI. They are definitely both AI, especially from our perspective. They are going to be
that thunder
behavior. How an AI needs to aim a gun to shoot down a ship is exactly the same way a human is going to aim that same gun to shoot a ship. The same behavior is going to run through all of this. Now, gameplay-wise, there are differences. A blade is a subcomponent of a ship. You will plug it in, and suddenly assign a turret to use that blade, and the turret knows how to do it. There are disadvantages here. First of all, their blades are going to be worse than NPCs. We have this grading of the player. If you take an average player, it's going to be better than an average NPC, and it's going to be better than an average blade. Yeah, so pretty much we automatically, it's not that good at the job. The turret blades are actually going to occupy a blade slot, which means you can't equip another blade for other functionality you might want on the ship. So that is a valuable slot that you're losing just to have one turret start shooting without an NPC there. Basically, you're a cheap bastard. You don't want to pay someone to take that slot, whether it's a player or an NPC.
No, I just don't trust people.
Just pay the money and hire someone and get them to shoot. You can pay for a blade that's the cheap alternative. Don't do that. I mean, do it if you can't afford any.
See, if I get angry at an AI blade for not doing its job, I can just take it outside and shoot it with a gun in anger. Probably not the most healthy reaction, but it's a video game, all right? Let me live it out. But if there's like a player and they don't do their job, what am I supposed to do? Be disgruntled? Be passive-aggressively disgruntled with them? Next time I'll just have to pay you a little bit less and send you on their way.
And then the ship is going to have only enough blades to run a part of the turrets. So let's say you have a ship like Hammerhead. You won't be able to have enough blade slots to make all the turrets function. So there's that balance. So this is mainly where the difference runs. AI-wise, I guess if some of the programmers want to chip into this with how the behavior for this works, maybe they can clear some stuff.
Yeah, behaviors are just the same behavior that an NPC we run. But maybe most importantly, the behavior will be the same, the activity will be the same, and maybe how you characterize the blade will go through trade skills. So sort of editing your the skills, the capacities of this in this case.
I think as Dan said, it's like not all the seats can be replaced, right? So there would be crew members that they would be purely NPCs, and I think the critical part here, I guess, is to like basically the same way we let designer in specific environment to ask NPCs to do things, right? This is how under the hood is the same way as when the player will give them commands, right? If you ask an NPC, say, go and be the turret guy, right? What will happen is the same as when a designer set up like a mission and he has an NPC sitting on a turret, on a turret seat. If you ask a guy, you say like, you know what? I want you to fix that panel, right? You can do it. And it's the same way as when a designer asks, an NPC to repair exactly that panel. So the way we build the behaviors, and especially like all this crew management, the part of the crew, the guys in the crew, it's made in a way in which they can perform by themselves as best as they can their jobs based on the skill, based on the traits, right? So imagine like you have somebody who likes to, procrastinate. You will have your engineer that goes around and just sometimes you find this smoking spot, or I don't know, like some resting areas, and it just hides there, not doing his job. But you might have his supervisor goes around and sends tasks to people, right? And then tries to supervise them. We have the same on the bridge crew, right? The captain can go around and supervise the NPCs and see if they do a job or not. Tell them something, and the same for the player will be basically, right? And then they can assign them. And also I think there is like there's more gameplay. Like, you can find who's best at doing specific job based on the one you hire, right? You might hire somebody really good on shield management, but he kind of sucks at, shooting, through a turret. And if, maybe you need both, but you don't have enough money, you hire one guy, and then, you live with whatever it's most of your needs. But the good thing is that, these skills and levels, just carry the game. So it's kind of cool that you see the guy maybe getting better at some of those. Some of those will allow you to trade. Some others will just be your character traits, Somebody's coward, and you just put him on, try to defend you, is gonna just be a coward pilot, right? So it might just give up defending you if things are bad.
Dude, I'm not a coward. I'm just cautious.
Cost much more money. So it is gonna create this extra, layer of gameplay as well.
Yeah, AI crew and AI blades are an interesting topic. I mean, it sounds speculative when they talk about it. It would have been nice when we saw that AI catch up on Star Citizen Live earlier this year. They showed a bunch of different AI functionalities. Would have been fantastic to see a demo of an NPC moving around a ship, or even an AI blade working a turret. But, despite these talks happening, when was this? In 2020, a lot of talk about AI in 2020, it seems. We just haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen anything about it yet. Let's jump into this talk once again with John Crew. We've also got Richard Towler here. They both have a lot of authority over what happens with ships. And they've got a lot of great answers here, starting with physicalized armor.
What is the current status of physicalized armor and damage and components?
Cool. So they always get lumped together in one thing, but they are somewhat independent systems. So physicalized damage, that is still being worked on. Physics guys are still working on it. They've got...
Keep in mind, you guys saw our first conversation with John Crew was in 2020. This one is 2 years later in 2022. So he did talk about physicalized damage being worked on soon at that point. So this answer, you get a little bit more context here with this answer. As soon as we're now 2 years later, let's see what he has to say about where they are with it.
Somewhat independent systems. So physicalized damage, that is still being worked on. Physics guys are still working on it. They've got a few more test cases, found a few more issues. They are looking at some smaller scale problems to solve, rather than going full ham straight on a spaceship, they're trying to solve a lot of these questions on smaller environmental assets, because if you can solve on that, it's much easier to then scale it up for a spaceship. So they're still working on that. The VFX team are quite heavily involved in doing a lot of tests, like simulations, for the whole breakability side of it, rather than just nice clean breaks, but having a bit of crumpling. I know I said VFX, people think it's just particle. It's not. They do a lot more than just particle work. There's a lot of mesh simulation that has knowledge within that team. So deformation and twisting and bending of assets. That's with those guys. Physicalized armor is like a byproduct of the damage system, so that will come with that. Physical components is sort of independent to that, because we can do physicalized components without the physical damage side. So we are looking in the very near future to start going through some of our ships and putting those components in the right places. Like if you look at our newer ships, say multicrew ones with interiors, Star Runner, Star Lifter, you will have seen all the hatches and you open them up, the components are actually there. So for new ships, that's built in. We're looking at going back to the older ships and updating those. It's obviously a lot of work there. So it's a balancing act between updating the older ones and delivering newer ones. But we are putting more of a focus onto going back to those older ships and updating them, because we do.
When's the last time we got an updated ship? When's the last time they took a ship in the PU and brought it up to a new standard? I think currently they're doing that with the Freelancer. But besides the Gladius and the Saber, I think last year, I don't even think they finished the Saber update, for us at least. I think it went into Squadron 42, but have we been seeing any other ships get updated over the last year or so?
You need those ships to have the items in the right place, to have the resource network, which is the thing we've shown in the past with all the nodes and the links, and I'm sure we'll see more of that in the coming months on ISC as that progresses. But yeah, that side is in progress. That's going to be a slow burn for many, many months. And you might see in coming patches ship interiors changing a little, but not see any like gameplay side of that. That's all the prep work coming for that.
All right, let's go to tractor beams.
Any recent work done on ship and vehicle tractor beams?
Yep. So we have a few ships in the pipeline that make use of them. The work done for the handheld tractor beam is probably 70% copy and paste into the vehicle ones. There's obviously some number twiddling behind the scenes in terms of the force and mass, and the VFX team want to upgrade the visuals of it, because obviously that it's a very thin, spindly FPS one versus one that you would find on a larger ship. And it sort of works out the box in the use cases we have. It is of limited use.
This is the tool he's talking about. This is a bigger one that we're going to get at some point.
Physical crates to load and unload. So that's why you don't really see it. And there is some UX that we want to improve, because on the FPS one, you have all your information on the back of the multi-tool. It tells you your force limits, everything. That is all getting transplanted to the remote view on the turrets, or if you're in a manned turret, having it on the turret HUD planes. Because whilst right now I could jump in game and use a tractor beam turret on certain ships, I have to know what all the buttons do and all the limitations, because it's not being presented to me, so it's not ready for player release. And then towards the end of the year, we're going to be doing some work, because at the moment vehicles are just simply hard-coded to not work with it, because there are some quite interesting technical problems to do with IFCS and tractor beams. IFCS is basically built on the assumption that one person is controlling the flight of the vehicle, and that becomes not true when people are grabbing it with a tractor beam. So we've got we know what we want to do with it. We just need to do that, because that's what everybody wants to do with tractor beams.
So the tractor beam bit is interesting. That was about a year ago, and we've seen this. Now, people lost their mind at this, forgetting that this isn't real. But there is something to be said about how tractor beams will affect vehicles. What he was saying there, you might not be able to stop a ship from flying away from the tractor beam, but if you look at how tractor beams work, that's not a good example. If you look at how tractor beams work, check this out. So on the HUD, you can see that there is a force meter. I think this is a distance meter, and kind of just like your modes. And when you pick something up, it explains how much force you're applying to that thing. So it's not like tractor beams are going to work as you can either move something or you can't, right? They're going to be collaborative. They're going to be complementary. If you find a ship and you want to keep that ship from moving, obviously you're not going to be able to do it with a single thing like this. They came out and said, this is a joke. You're just having fun. This isn't how it's going to work. But if you had 4 of these, and they all were applying, how much did it say on there? And they were all applying 200 to 400 to, 2,000 to 8,000 newtons of force, however much it takes, you should technically be able to slow down a ship, right? That's how immersive features work. You can add on and use them in ways that they might not have been meant to use. So it sounds like one of the big things they're trying to figure out isn't necessarily how we can move a vehicle with a tractor beam, but how multiple tractor beams might be able to affect vehicle movement. So I think that's, I don't think they really said too much about that since then. We could always see in this one if there was anything, but I don't think there was. C1, just the C1 Spirits tractor beam. But we also had that tractor beam episode of ISC earlier, which is where that footage came from, and we'll probably hear more about this by the time we reach CitizenCon. All right, let's listen to what they have to say about ship stealth. It's kind of a weird one because it's always been in game, but it's never actually. It's like not in game. You can use stealth, but the systems make it hard to know if you're using stealth, know if it's effective, know how it works. See what they have to say about it.
Will ship and vehicle stealth see some love in the future?
Yes. So we've already kind of sneaked in a couple of changes with a couple of the stealth ships we have in the game right now, which lowers their signals a little bit. But we do have a plan to kind of make stealth and basically the entire radar, system kind of matter in terms of those ships. But again, we're kind of in this point where our focus is the combat speeds, but also the reason why that's holding things back in terms of stealth is because once we get to these new features, it requires a complete rebalance of all the items in the game, and it's the items that define the stealth aspect. So we kind of need to get to this point first, and then once we get to that point, we can start looking at what makes stealth ships, and how do we bring the signals of those ships down with and then what downsides do those components have without really taking away from the purpose of those ships. But yeah, we've got to get to that point first, and then we can start balancing the game towards this.
Oh, yeah. Don't expect much from stealth. I think it's going to be something we see more after engineering and resource network get components to actually be balanced. Advantage of multi-crew ships over single fight. That's an interesting one.
What will be the value in picking a multi-crew ship over multiple single fighters?
Yeah, you're pretty much right that this comes again down to the speeds. So with the unlimited speeds, obviously with a turret, you're limited by the speeds of the turrets, but once we slow everything down, does the basic speed of the ship and the speed of the turret will become a much more determining factor in that combat success of that ship. And also we're still figuring out the strength of these turrets as well. We're still not, we haven't really, the game isn't final. We're still working on this, and as I said before, we're still in a situation where some ships that do have a turret are much more powerful than others, and we're still working out what that means. Is it the turret speed? Is it the weapons you attach to those turrets? And stuff like, it is just ship it's on. The changes we did a few patches ago to introduce capacitors did do quite a marked shift away from this whole let me bring two ships instead of one with a multi-crew. If you go look at the analytics, which are not the be-all and end-all of balance decisions, they're just part of what informs changes. Those ships that have turrets went from being well below the fighters in all the applicable metrics to being at the top end. So even now in combat, they are becoming more strong, and in the future, and to now to a lesser extent, the simple cost and maintenance of running multiple ships will be a factor that people have to pay attention to. It's going to be much more time and fuel and insurance and cost efficient to all pile into one ship to get to places. And we want to, especially with things like Pyro coming online, getting those smaller ships to one location is going to be quite a chore.
It already is. It already is a chore to get multiple ships to a location. Honestly, when if I'm not specifically going to do something in game, I so much rather just ride passenger on somebody else's ship than fly my own. And when that becomes a thing, when you need to fly in somebody else's ship than your own, like if they take you to Pyro, you're gonna have to rely on multi-crew ships to get back, right? So I feel like they're already headed in that direction. With engineering, obviously, it'll get even more powerful. And as capital ships come online, the Polaris looking like it'll be the first one to really start that push. We'll probably see them start to focus a lot more on making sure that multi-crew ships are more exciting and easy to use than a bunch of different small ships.
You do the jumps quicker, they can get there quicker. That sort of time sink aspect of it will become more important, which is perhaps less clear in the current game, where everyone, even though quantuming from if one of you spawns at Microtech and one of you spawns at Hurston, that's a good chunk of time to meet up. That's only going to get longer in the future. So being in a single place, in a single ship, will just get that experience happening quicker for you.
I imagine changes to physicalized damage, the resource management system, and everything will also go a long way towards making multi-crew ships more viable.
Yes. Yeah, because at the moment, if you're in a turret gun and like, oh, I'm not doing anything for all the time, I'm not in combat, whereas there will be things to do outside of combat for those additional crew members. So it's, I get the aspect of where if we're both in two single seaters, we're both doing something all the time right now. That's true now. That's going to be true in the future in a multi-crew ship.
It can be frustrating to run a live environment in the middle of game development. It's the combat and vehicle experience in Star Citizen today is not what the combat and vehicle experience of Star Citizen will be tomorrow. And there's still valuable testing and stuff. There's still reason to have the live environment. I mean, the testing and the input that we get from the backers has proven itself out over the last 10 years, more times than we need to discuss right now. But it can still be frustrating for players and for developers alike to be there and know that this experience that there is today is not the experience that it will be tomorrow, both for good and for bad. Some things are easier today and they will get more difficult tomorrow, but things that are difficult today, like making a multi-crew ship seem viable, will become easier in the future. So it's I don't know, I put my fan hat on for a second. I feel that frustration sometimes. So
yeah, and we were talking before this, and though we were thinking about how we were going to answer some of the questions, and we realized that the answers that we've got here, these changes we've alluded to, we haven't actually talked about externally, even though we've been working on them for 6 to 9 months. We're like, oh, so we need to, in our heads, we know where it is now internally, which is a vastly different experience to the current live build. So it's this big time delay that we have to wrap our heads around.
Because many of
those answers where they're like, yeah, we've been working on this for 9 months, but we haven't said anything externally, and then they're actively saying something externally. Those are the kinds of things that make me a little bit frustrated with years like this year, where we know without a doubt that there are game systems and ship systems and things that they've been working on that they updated us on that they have gone quiet on. And I know. They're getting ready for CitizenCon, but it's August, I think there were some good opportunities earlier this year to update us on some of the stuff that showed up, let's say, in Chris's letter from the chairman in December that we haven't gotten to see, and maybe we'll see at CitizenCon, maybe we won't. But sometimes people will be like, oh, well, they probably don't have anything to say. They've always got stuff to say. It's just a matter of getting the right devs in front of the camera. And I know that's a challenge, so I'm not going to blame them for that. But Spectrum posts work, little tidbits, answering some questions and stuff is nice. And I'm not the kind of person to go on Spectrum and scream about that. That's honestly, it comes more from the wanting to make content about this stuff side than the wanting to just know for the sake of knowing. But I think there are some things that would be nice to hear about every once in a while that we haven't, like hacking, for instance, was dropped a couple years ago early. Theaters of War. All right. Escape pods.
Something this person has always found confusing is escape pods. How are they going to be launched from ships? Even on newer ones at Gold Standard, they don't all seem to have an actual exit point from the hull, and some are quite far away from where the crew would actually be.
I hope all the newer ones have a marked escape point. A few of them are quite hidden, they are very subtle, POM line cutouts of where the panel's going to pop off, and they might not always go the way you think they are. Just because they're on the upper floor of a ship, they might not be coming out the top. They might be all coming out the bottom just because of the way we've routed stuff inside. But they all do have a...
That is a crazy requirement for making your spaceship I mean, I understand if you're making a real spaceship, you have to do that. But imagine designing a virtual spaceship. You get everything done. All is finished. Then you're like, wait, how the heck do they get out? If it explodes, like, let's make the escape pod go this way. Oh, crap, it goes straight through the shield component. That is a hefty requirement for something like this compared to some other games or fiction where you don't really have to think about that.
Sometimes some of our like suit lockers might look like escape pods, which might be confusing to people because they're the big vertical standing things. But it's usually either vertical standing escape pods, side like escape rafts, like you see in the 890 in Idris, where it's a hexagonal box that's the back on the Argo MPV, goes out the side, or might be ejection beds, like you see on the raft of Freelancer. But in terms of, hey, how do I get to them? Because my ship just explodes right now. Again, this is tied to physical damage, so I wouldn't expect escape pods to become a thing until that comes online, because until that point, we do have the whole, hey, my ship has 10,000 health, it gets to 0, it goes bang. We don't have that finesse where we get to a point that, well, with physical damage, there isn't a health pool. So it's basically degrading your ship to the point it becomes non-functional, at which point then you go, hey, it's time to get off this ship. So you will have that grace period, which could be seconds, depending on if shots end up going into your power plant. But ideally, it's going to be multiple minutes, if not hours, where your ship is crippled, non-responsive, and you go, right, now is the time to get off this.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait for that reality when it's so terrifying in game right now to start getting shot and not know where the shots are coming from. Partially because you don't get a ton of feedback to tell you, but also because you don't know what's going to hit you that's going to blow you up immediately. It's going to be so nice when you can be getting shot in your ship and you know you have enough time to get off the ship if you aren't going to be able to defend it. Like, let's say you're flying around in a constellation. Wouldn't it be great to know that that constellation is going to last you like 5 minutes for you to be able to decide if you can fix everything, if you can fight them off, or if you need to escape, as opposed to just making that decision in like 30 seconds, 60 seconds because you're getting slammed by laser fire. You don't know what the heck's going on.
So it's very much a future thing. It's planned in for the future, not for the current gameplay.
Yeah, the Star Trek ideal of everything blowing up in the bridge and running around and having to fix things is definitely something it's been in the dream of multi-crew gameplay for this game for a long time.
Engineering.
It's honestly what first drew me to the project back then. So when we talk about frustrations, one of mine is sitting and waiting patiently for multi-crew gameplay. It is, all things in their time. Let's see. Regarding flight physics on planets, things like VTOL mode sort of lose meaning when you can just hover upside down or nose pointing at the ground. Why does it make flying easy, especially for things like the Prospector? While it does make flying easy, especially for things like the Prospector, it does break immersion. Are there any plans to force ships to stay close to horizontal at slow speeds? This would also affect ground combat and make it more necessary, as you wouldn't just be able to point straight down at targets.
All right, here we go. This is the big one. I love hearing about this.
Just that one is yes. So it's point with explaining. So at the moment we have aero surfaces on these ships, but it doesn't fly like a plane. So they're still driven by the thrusters, but we do change them based on the planet they're on. So they do lose some power in atmosphere, but the thrusters to generate the performance in space have to be set in strengths. It has to generate the accelerations that we require in space. And then when you fly in atmosphere, you lose some efficiency, but we still need the strength of the thrusters to be able to push the ship through the air. And actually pushing aero surfaces through the air takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. So we are limited in terms of, to get the maneuverability in atmosphere currently, we still need quite strong, we still need quite strong thrusters, which means you can hover quite easily. But that's not always going to be the case. So in the future, we are going to move towards control surfaces. And this is going to allow us to move the movement of the ship from thrusters to aerodynamics. So it's going to be the aerodynamics driving the maneuverability of the ship in atmosphere. And then the thrusters are just going to help a little bit. They're going to help just move the ship and allow the thruster layouts to kind of do their work. But it's not going to be the primary source. So if you're flying a Gladius, for example, and you go really slow, it's just not going to have the power to kind of keep it up. And that's where the VTOL ship's going to come in, where they can transform and fly in VTOL and hover. And that's where they'll have the advantage. But we need to add control surfaces first and work out how we do all the controls with that as well, because it's quite a complex problem to solve. Without going like, full flight simulator, for example.
Right. Didn't we do some version of this before with adding the
old hover mode?
Hover mode.
To an extent, yes. But that sort of tried to solve the problem in a different way, and some people liked it, a lot of people didn't like it, and it was the right idea with not quite the right implementation. Another thing
it's literally, this is such a debate in the Star Citizen realm. I am sure there are people in chat who loved hover mode and people in chat who absolutely hated it. Like, if you talk about hover mode, you will get all kinds of opinions on it because, oh man, oh my gosh, there was this whole thing on Spectrum and Reddit where people were obsessed with telling folks who didn't like hover mode, get good. You guys remember this? You remember that? Constantly, people would just be like, get good, get better at flying. You're not doing it right, get better. And then you would go and you'd try to take off with a ship in a hangar, and the ship would just barrel you into the side of the hangar without you doing anything. And then people would be like, nah, dude, just get good, just get better at flying. And then you come back and you listen to what the devs say about hover mode.
It was the right idea with not quite the right implementation.
And still, you'll still get people being like, no, they nailed it. It was great. It was good. It's how it should have worked. They need to bring it back. And then you look at what they want to do now with the heat system, with control surfaces, and it's like, why would you prefer to have an arbitrary limitation instead of a systemic one like control surfaces and aerodynamics? It's kind of the problem they made with it's almost like master modes, where like master modes forces you to switch into a different mode to do something rather than having the ship systemically cause you to, like give you the motivation to switch modes. I don't think it's as bad as what hover mode was, but it's the same kind of idea. Like, control surfaces are meant to encourage us to do things and use what we could call hover mode. Whereas the old hover mode was just kind of like, hey, you're going this slow, switch your thrust, good luck. I don't know, I wasn't a big fan of it. As you could tell, I was told oftentimes to get good, and spoiler alert, I never did.
Another thing we can look at when all the stuff Rich just talked about is heat. We don't really use heat at the moment because the way heat works in our game is not how we want it to work long term, and this is something with a resource system that is being entirely redone. But for ships that, like a Gladius, as well as needing that control surface to keep up in the air, like if you're not going fast, those thrusters can start overheating as an extra penalty, because in reality, you could just upend your Gladius like that and balance it on its main thrusters. But because they're powerful enough to do that, so they should be powerful enough to do that, but they're going to be working so hard that heat is going to build up, and we can cause intentional problems doing it that way to stop. I've seen people landing their Scorpiuses on the wings that way, and that sort of stuff will start being a lot more
like rare, like a Gunstar in Last Starfighter.
Yeah.
This person would like to know when we are getting better lights for the exterior of our ships. The Mole has forward-facing lights, which allow the pilot to see in front of the ship, but when you try to land on the dark side of a moon or planet, you cannot see below your ship, so you find yourself landing on large rocks or uneven terrain. Also, the players in the mining turrets are unable to mine rocks in the dark because mining turrets do not have lights on them, making it very hard to see the rocks below the ship.
This was a year before this is like 6 months before we got the Vulture, and you guys have seen how those lights are.
Yep, so I'll start with the turret one first. There was a problem with turrets that didn't allow us to have lights on it back when the Mole came out, and that's something we are actively fixing on the Reclaimer at the moment for supporting salvage, because it has a very similar problem. The pilot of the Reclaimer has the humongous floodlights for illuminating what's in front, but the little salvage turrets next to it aren't necessarily always going to be looking that way. So we've got some lights on those, and we're just working out the quirks with the system of, at the moment, they're all connecting to the same light controller, so the pilot can turn them all on and off, which is less than ideal for those in the turrets when the pilot decides he wants to turn his lights off and their lights turn off. But it's the goal to have them on, and then when that's working, we can go back to the mole.
That is still how it works, right?
Lights are too dim / too bright.
Are they working on the Reclaimer now?
A classic video game developer art design standoff that we've had for years, and probably every game studio has. Designers like, I want a light that can see 5 kilometers ahead of me, which means it has to be a certain brightness. Art go, that's too bright. It just blows out all the art. Everything is just bright white. It's a common complaint I see regarding paints as well on ships, in that in some lights they look completely different to in other lights. It's a similar problem with light intensity there. Things look good at certain light levels, things look bad at certain light levels. So design always want the brightest lights we can possibly get away with, so you don't crash into rocks. Art want things to look nice, which means nice balanced lights. And the way we're going to likely solve this is that literally having a high beam and a low beam setting. So if you want nice big bright lights for flying super fast, you toggle your headlights into or night vision. I know Todd is very keen on having some night vision. I am as well, but in terms of headlights, we do want that. Maybe not fully dynamic, but some control over the intensity.
Let's jump forward to player-facing modularity. This is a big one. A lot of people are excited for modular ships. It became a big topic last year when they introduced the Galaxy and talked about modularity, even though we weren't really getting them too much. Let's see what they were saying though last summer.
Air-facing ship modularity? Question mark?
Yep, still planned. Again, like the answer I gave earlier, the people working on it were reprioritized onto other squadron work. So no progress since I last talked about it. It's still planned, still something we want to do, still going to support it. It's not, people think I have a secret vendetta to cut player-facing modularity from the game. It's something we want to do. But there is a place in Star Citizen for both modularity on ships and baked variants. They're not just one or the other.
And if you saw my recent monthly report video that came out on Saturday, you will know that they're currently working on 14 different vehicles for the game. And many of those are variants. It's actually a lot higher amount than they're normally doing. But yeah, a lot of them are variants. They've been doing a lot of variants, which kind of gets people again back on the topic of modularity and whether or not, like, how is it going to be supported? Wouldn't it be a better idea to do modules to these ships rather than variants? But variants sell for more money, and it's a never-ending conversation that I think they really need to balance and think hard about. Like, how many ships do you want to introduce when you could just be changing out components and stuff?
Will ground refuel vehicles be a thing?
Yes. These are all the people that want that one fuel tanker that was in the background of the Vulcan concept. I know Paul Jones really wants to make it happen. Because after spaceships run out of fuel, you can get Starfarer to come refuel you. Ground vehicles currently don't use fuel, but we want them to use fuel in the future. So then, naturally, that will need to be a thing, because if I can only dread people trying to refuel like a little ground vehicle with a Starfarer planet side, it's not the best application of tools to fix the job.
And
Right. So there's not really that many more feature-facing questions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the rendering and graphics team. so that they can talk a little bit about their challenges in getting night vision working in the game, because it is something that's been asked about a lot. But they have some things to say about the process of making that work.
Last time this came up, you promised you were going to lynch Todd Pappy. So I think you should follow through on that promise and get him. And because we need I have technical ideas and thoughts on that, but we need the design. Like, is night vision in the future the same as now? Is it infrared? Is it based on some other form of technology? But yeah, whatever.
Magic beams. We're gonna use beams for night vision, okay, guys? I hope you don't mind, but we are Beam Citizen. Makes the most sense.
In the past is that if you want to do it really well, then you emulate what we call spectral rendering, which is an incredibly complicated field, but there's elements of it you can simulate where you can type of identify the materials that have a non-standard way of reflecting infrared light, which would be like anything that glows in the dark or appears to glow in the dark on an infrared camera, which is type of like reflective gear, like your I don't know, I can't think of any good examples right now, but there's certain materials that type of don't reflect as you'd expect. So they need picking out especially, otherwise doesn't look right in night vision. Otherwise it's type of a filter. You need to type of take your colors and type of it's a complicated topic. It's hard to type of break it down, but what we see as red, green, and blue is obviously not the true picture of what happens in reality. In reality, there's millions of wavelengths of light, infinite wavelengths along a spectrum, and then infrared is just looking at one portion of that spectrum. But the artist doesn't model what happens in that different spectrum. They just model what happens in these very free specific spectrums that the human eye can see. So we have to type of map or guess, how do we get from the artist all the colors to the type of the infrared spectrum, or whatever spectrum our imaginary night vision might be. And there's ways of approximating that, or you can offer custom textures if you want to, like, say, if the artist can tell this is exactly what it looks like in infrared. But we clearly can't go and remake every texture in the entire game to show how the infrared would work. We double the textures in the game, so you normally do like some type of automated mapping that guesses, or type of does a best guess approach, and then you type of override the particularly special case ones. But yeah, it's all got to start with Todd and the request.
All right. Okay.
So
no, you did good. You did good. The next time I ask the question will be to Todd.
I wonder if we have that. Did he ask that to Todd? Let's see. It is with Todd. All right, let's see. Let's see if he answered it.
Will night vision ever be a future feature?
I want it. I want there to be different types of vision. So, and I mean, it's something that we talked about, like Tony and I have talked about it for Discovery, is being able to look at different aspects of the EM spectrum, whether it be X-ray or EM or IR. So, or in this case, night vision. This to me is just a different, vision mode. So
that's what we've been waiting for. That was the answer. All right, whatever. Let's jump to the next Invictus Week Q&A, because this one actually had a pretty decent amount of information in here. Let's jump to modular. They're starting off with modularity, so that's nice. Let's listen in.
It says, has there been any progress on modularity since it was last talked about?
Yes. Good news at last. Good news.
Well, we'll be the judge of that. We'll be the judge of that.
So,
ready, chat.
You rise on the track, guys. Come on. So with the development of the whole C, we've pretty much figured out the last hurdle. And in fact, Chris is responsible for the test that I got him to do for it, where we can have object containers, which is the interior collection of assets, loaded as an item, loaded onto the ship, because that's how the rear of the whole C is attached to the ship and moves with it. What had stopped us technically going any further with this was items inside those object containers couldn't talk to the vehicle it was connected to. Right. So the example of the Retaliator, the torpedo droppy arms, they're actually part of the exterior of the ship currently, because that's the only way they can work. So if we allowed you to swap the modules, no matter what module you had, there'd be a pair of torpedo arms dangling through the middle of it. Chris did a test where he attached a load of missile racks and torpedoes to the inside of the back of the hull C, which is not going to ship with it.
Wait, you say we're not having a torpedo hull C?
Yeah. There is a shelf that says do not submit in very low. And the pilot had full control of that, and they could fire them. So after the whole C ships and we found any more quirks with that setup. We're in a position where, to my knowledge, touch wood, technically there's nothing stopping us doing modularity now. That was the last big hurdle for us.
There's nothing technically stopping us from doing it, but there's also priorities. And building a team.
Nothing technically stopping us.
Yeah, nothing technically stopping us. Yeah.
So what I heard was that whole CMX at Citizen.com.
Totally. Just full of size 9 torpedoes.
How about a whole CLX?
The cargo arms are just full of torpedo racks that just fire out.
All right. Next one, I'm just going to put the camera right on John Crew. Physicalized damage. This has been one of those, when we talk about things that hold up this system or that system, the idea of bullets and ballistics and then passing through and damaging the components within a ship has been linked to be the keystone to so many other developments. Anything you can tell us about physicalized damage?
Good news part 2. So it is really under heavy active development at the moment. So physics team have done a lot of work in the last 6 months on it. We're now at a point where other feature and gameplay teams have joined them to sort of work out the quirks with it. The vehicle content team have provided assets of ships set up in this new way of doing things. Should caveat this, it's not a vehicle thing. It's an everything thing. Every destructible system in the game will use this. So whilst everyone sort of uses the vehicle example of like, bullets going through ships, it replaces the prop breakable system, it replaces the environment breakable system, it replaces the vehicle damage system. There's another one I forget. So environment teams, prop teams, vehicle teams, we're all working on this at the moment.
This is crazy. I think this was the first time we heard about this grouped damage system, which they eventually revealed to us was called Maelstrom. They hadn't, but like we just thought physicalized damage was a ship thing, and then this summer they're like, okay, this is going to be environments, buildings, props, vehicles, ships. It's hefty.
Use case scenarios that are with the engineers.
It's more like an overall destructible physics system.
Yes. Yeah. People have probably heard the word Maelstrom in various monthly reports and pieces.
I can't remember that's legit.
It's not like I'll wipe the board when we get back.
Right.
So that's the name of that overarching system. It's definitely been said.
No, that was the first time we'd ever heard that.
More than just the physicalized damage for ships, it is a global destructible physics system that we're not going to sit here and commit to it being applied to every single element of Star Citizen.
No.
There's always going to be performance considerations. But you develop the system, and then you start to see where you can plug it in.
You develop the system, and then you start breaking everything with it. Yeah, love that.
Ship tractors. Ship tractor beams were recently brought up again. What's the state of these and their large cargo counterparts?
So the ship tractor beams, we've done a... Can I talk? Yeah.
I'm just like John to make sure it's okay.
We've done a lot of work for them recently. We have current implementation set up on multiple vehicles that are meant to actually have the tractor beams attached to them. Their current implementation works from a vehicle setup standpoint. There's still some remaining work to do from the actual EUPUT. They're actually delivering the vehicle tractor beams themselves. But right now in the environment we've developed it, you can spawn the ships that have them in and you use them.
Ooh,
a big bit of confusion is because the sizing, when we did some of it, we did it to weapon sizes instead of component sizes, whereas EUPU have done their development on it. They've decided they want to go in the direction of component sizing rather than weapon sizing. So some of the size numbers will have changed, but how much they lift is consistent for how much we've always wanted it to lift. So, for example, instead of going all the way up to I think the biggest one we ever said was like size 6 or size 5 or something, the biggest one now will be the size 3. We might do size 4 if we ever do something for a very niche situation. But
the SRV is
the SRV
3 now.
Is a 3, but that 3 is able to move ships. But size 2s can do 32 SU containers. I can't remember how much size 1s and 0s do. But
see, that makes me nervous. He's and this could be he's just talking about this. This is the kind of hard part about these sorts of things with Star Citizen and open development in general is he's saying this, but it might not be exactly how it is. He's saying size 2 tractor beams can lift 32 SU boxes. But what if that 32 SU box has like the densest material known to man in it? Can a size 2 still lift it, or would you need a size 3? What if it had the lightest material known to man? Could a size 1 then lift it? Or would size 1 be limited to certain size boxes rather than mass? Because right now they're limited, or they're rated based on their Newton force lifting capabilities, and that's kind of how we've been led to believe it'll work. But then here he's talking about SU boxes. I don't think it's going to be limited to certain types of boxes, but we'll have to see what they say, probably around CitizenCon time or later this year.
But like we've just reformatted it as the system's start formalized a lot more. But yep, on the ships we've got an implemented version of it working currently.
How's the golden standard for the Retaliator going? We'll get to that point where we do some updates on ships general, but this was a highly voted question.
Yeah. It is in progress. We're working on the cockpit at the moment, bring it up to modern standards, because it's a bit old-fashioned, I guess is one way to say. It's not really got MFDs to the right metrics anymore, right? Doing it for Squadron first, and then it'll work its way into the P when we're happy with what we need to do for Squadron.
Would there be a way to dock a reclaimer to a station in the future to avoid needing to go down to the planet to retrieve it?
So we wanted that originally for the original implementation of the docking collars, but we found that the current positioning of the arms and the engines were off. So we're going to have to go in and fix that, as well as I think we found the collars were the wrong size as well. So the door is just random.
We looked at that and we did some work towards. No, we wanted to do it. We just didn't have time when we were doing all the other
collars. So it's wanted, but it's going to require changes to the exterior, the physical arms and everything, which are very complicated mechanisms. So it's a big time investment. So something that's going to get done, but it's when we can find resources to actually do it. Because, like you said, with the ramp up, every time we try and expand the team, we're losing resources to actually train the new people that are coming in.
So rework, complete rework.
What is all this Crusader hate going on in chat? Y'all better watch it.
And then I got the names mixed up.
There's certainly a lot of room for improvement with the Reclaimer.
Like the rear cargo lift and everything.
Yeah, the whole rear section. I mean, everyone's favourite multi-stage elevator.
Wait, did you say Starfire or Reclaimer?
Reclaimer.
Okay. The Starfire is perfect.
Starfire is not perfect.
The Starfire is having its insides pulled out. Redone completely.
One of the most voted up questions here is about the Polaris. Simply put, is the Polaris actually in production? It shows that it is on the progress tracker, but the Apollo was once on the progress tracker at one point as well, and priorities change, and yada, yada, yada. So
people be traumatized by the Apollo.
There we go. Oh no, but that just sounded like Ben wanted the question.
No,
Ben, you were talking crap. Ben. Is the Polaris in production?
I'm going to start with the Apollo. Let's talk about capital ships and whether they're in development. So Apollo.
The Apollo is now a capital ship.
Yeah. Bruce or not.
We can talk about the Apollo.
So the Polaris is I'd say it's more in pre-production. Like, we are spending time investigating it at the moment, as we've already kind of hinted on. When it comes to our capital ships, we want to make sure that we're tackling them in a way that allows us to scale up to not just do one capital ship, and we can tick off a few more from the lineup. It is like literally the last couple of weeks we've been looking at it, breaking down the concept, breaking down what is involved with actually delivering it. I think what people need to understand as well is, this is quite an old ship. The concept is quite old. There's a lot of gaps in it, as Corey mentioned. So really, we're just doing our kind of our sanity check on everything, make sure we've got everything in progress. It will be going into full production
very soon.
Shortly. Yeah, very, very soon.
Very soon at TM.
Can confirm it is in production. We just got an update on the monthly report. The Polaris is in white box, which I think means maybe we'll see it by the end of next year. But that's a big freaking ship. It's the first RSI Capital ship I think we're getting a full interior of, so that's probably going to take a while.
Chris deleted the old interior setup level for it this afternoon, ready for the new one. So that's how soon it goes.
We are working on it.
Yeah.
It's just it's a full team on it. Yeah, okay. Doing the pre-productions.
That's
in the pipeline last time. There's been a lot of pre-planning changes to help us further, not have us trip over ourselves. So it is in production in that sense.
Yeah, it hasn't started
white box open.
Yeah, so like we haven't started like adding assets to the editor and stuff, but we are basically doing a full breakdown of what we've got, working out how we're going to tackle it, trying to get the plans in place, and answer the questions. There's some holes in the concept which we could do with a little bit more work on, and they're a bit loose. So it's just kind of breaking down that stuff. But we're not like, we haven't got a team of artists that work on it. We have one, and then I look at it every so often, Corey sticks his nose in it, and it's just, it's us trying to, we want to come to a point where we can come together, have a proper kickoff with the team that are working on it, and go, okay, we know what we're asking you to do, rather than being like, hey, everyone, let's have a look, click. This is cool. Yeah,
and to touch on the roadmap bit, something that often gets overlooked on the roadmap is it doesn't particularly show like people moving on and off projects or tasks. So you could have like someone on the Polaris for 1 week, and they go off it for a week, and then they go back on it for another week. That will show as 3 weeks continuous. Or you could have one person come on, one person go off, then another person comes on. That will show 2 people for that entire time. In conjunction with that, we've, as part of all of our pipeline work, we've been moving away from our previous scheduling method, which is what the roadmap uses, to being more in Jira. And then because that live updates with the data as we're working through things, and then at some point we go back and put it in there. So there is a bit of lag in how the roadmap updates. So yes, people have been working on it, but it's not like hey, we've got 8 artists working on it since 2 weeks ago when the roadmap said.
And I was going to say, like with the Apollo, because the Apollo was mentioned as well, is that's pretty much what we've done on the Apollo. We had one artist working on it, doing all the pre-production work, making sure it was in a good state, answering all the questions that were unanswered on it, so it's ready to go into production. It is not in production. We haven't got a whole team of artists working on it, but we've done all that preliminary work, and that's why something's been on the roadmap, because someone's been allocated to it, they've been chipping away at it and getting it ready.
Right. Let's see. Next question says, some ship designs have flaws with component swapping. How will this be addressed on legacy ships, and especially where components won't fit past doors or airlocks?
So, a lot of that's what gold standard's for. So when we go through and do gold standards, using the Retaliator as an example, a lot of the components wouldn't fit through the doors of the Retaliator as you tractor beam them out and move them. So the doors and things have been widened so they would actually fit. Another thing is what components are actually meant to be taken out with tractor beam. So it's size 3, and capitals obviously are meant to be tractor beamed out. You're supposed to go to a dry dock and someone else will take it out for you because they're too large of components to do, because theoretically to get to them you need to cut parts of the hull out because they're just too large for a person to lift. So the size 0, 1 and 2 you should be able to tractor beam out. Doors that don't fit currently, gold standard will address that, but until we do gold standards on the interiors of a lot of the ships, there may be doors where you can't get them out or places you can't get the components through.
There is a couple like random occasions where like we get like as artists like, oh, can you jump on this ship for like, it's like a half an hour fix to allow you to get your components out your ship, and like we have those, we've got all of the ships like divvied up amongst ourselves, so like even though people leave and people join, there's like the list of all of the ships, and it's like, okay, you're responsible for these. So if there's a component swapping issue on like a particular ship, that like one of mine, I've forgotten which one it was, but I had to like remove around a little bit of the room. Nothing players would really notice, but like it's just enough to make the collision a bit more comfortable to move it out. So you get occasions like that where you'll get like a random like bug come through, and it's like, oh, if you've got a spare 10 minutes to do that, you quickly look at it, you're like, oh yeah, that's a really quick fix that will hopefully make your lives a lot easier. So we do try to, even though we're like, I'm on this ship for X amount of time, I will disappear for like an hour or 2 if it saves you guys the grief,
It depends on the amount of work, right?
Yeah. If it's like a massive overhaul, like obviously that takes, we need, but if I can like sneak it in, like I'll try,
Some of it's really quick wins, like when the ship was initially modeled, or when someone created a component base, they just forgot to like cut a hole in the collision for the component. So it's literally impossible to remove it because it's like behind the collision of the exterior.
And I think like, a lot of our ships were made before we had like, there was no feature work had been done on this. We didn't know how we were going to tackle it. So we were just making the best decisions we could at the time.
Yeah.
And now we know better. Yeah. So that pipeline has evolved, and some of them are super quick. Some of them are like, this derives no animation. It has no mechanics to do the animation. There's just a hole behind it. And they're the ones that take a bit more time. They need a proper art pass, proper design pass.
Why they call it game development and not game construction.
Well, I mean, Vanguard's a good example, right? Had that little railing, which from that point looked nice, having that little railing as you go up the stairs. Things away, it just cut the railing off. It's a small thing, easier to do, but like at the time when we did it, looked good from that standpoint. No one really thought, oh, that railing's going to get in the way of the components, because it wasn't something that people actively
Same with some of the component hatches that have doors that sort of clamshell open.
Yeah.
They were done so they open it, looks nice and cool, and like, yeah, it'll fit out there. You can get there when it comes to actually take it out. They're a centimetre not far open enough. So there's all sorts of little things that you don't spot.
And this is the kind of stuff that happens with any video game. It's just usually they don't have a live environment in the middle of their development.
It's just tech debt, really. Like, you know, a feature comes online, it gets proven out, and then if we have to re-implement that into a bunch of like existing assets, you know, we try our best to anticipate what kind of features will be coming, but we don't necessarily know how a feature will work. So, you know, the part of the challenge of being sort of a team that's affected by a feature is you have to then retroactively support it, you know. So I think that's a big part of what gold standard is. These are all the features we need to support in our vehicles, and it's basically making those vehicles comply with those features.
We had it with salvage as well, right? Had quite a few of us working on it to really try and like get that stuff sorted out. And other ships that were made maybe more recently, or whenever, like particular ships, you go to fix it and you're like, this is fine.
Yeah,
great.
It becomes a part of your, you know, your validation. It becomes a part of the like acceptance criteria for the ship. Is it needs to support this feature. So, you know, we would bring those features into the like review process and basically make sure actually, if we're making a new ship, it should have physicalized components, etc. That all of the features that exist for the ship will be, you know, validated as a part of the, you know, review process. So it's more the older content that was kind of, you know, when we first started out, we were kind of discovering what a ship.
It's why each one of these that we make, we get better at it.
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
You know, the Rock DS.
Oh my God. The Rock DS. He just ends the show.
The salvage thing was a really good example of how some things you just can't plan for ahead of time. Like, salvage is coming online, we know it's going to use the UV2 damage system. We've done all that for the ships already, because that's what damage does when you shoot ships. So we're good. And then when it came online, we're like, oh boy, we're not good.
Yeah, we didn't realize quite how much of the like the visuals would affect the actual data. So you know, the parts of the ship that were like slightly you know, wouldn't necessarily take as much damage, and they it would look fine when you're blowing this thing up. But then it was meaning that you could never like 100% salvage the ship, because you couldn't salvage like certain panels, and honestly, it just looked a bit weird that, you know, you'd be salvaging along and it would just stop.
Back to like the salvage stuff, or like the tractor beaming of components. Like, if I look at it and I go, oh, that's a quick fix, it'll be a quick thing. But if I look at it and I'm like, that is not a quick thing, I need to ask for some time because it will affect my other work, then it becomes
I mean,
like,
we did say that you could have a look at it and see how much work it is, and if it, you know, if the file's already been set up, all the animation data's there, it's all ready to go, it's just a case of we just need to export it and do it, and cool. But if it's going to take you away from the current vehicle you're on for a week or two, then
when the character was developed, we did prove
It's nice to fix bugs as a treat.
It's just there's more to it.
It's like
we made sure it would work, but that's
okay. I thought you were going to say, it would only take 5 minutes.
No. What I'm saying is, we just proved out the spacing, the animation mechanism and stuff. Like, it's going to need UV2s, it's going to be LODs, it's going to need more detail and popping, like all that stuff.
It's not going to take 5 minutes.
I mean, he did manage to build the entire Fury all by himself.
I know. On a single weekend. In memory of Alex.
That's in the chat.
Let's see. A long time ago in the shipyard articles, you mentioned different component types. We talked about sizes, industrial, military, etc., and the ability to tune them. Is this still the plan? And if so, can you give us any hope for the future of tuning? Love Twingo? Electric car? Twingo?
We'll talk about the Twingo for the rest of the time. It's sort of more of a EUPU thing now. Definitely plans to have those different types, grades, sort of like performance windows for different items. And they have a pretty comprehensive engineer / tuner / repairer gameplay proposal that they're working on as part of some of the other features they're doing. So it's sort of tuning items is part of that role. So it's definitely planned.
Okay.
Yeah, with that, let's see, anything else? Normally, or we're just about out of time. Normally, we do kind of a round robin on ships that are in production right now. Like you said, sometimes the public roadmap falls a little bit out of sync and stuff like this. Can you just give us an update on ships that are what you would consider in active production as opposed to like pre-production? We know the Polaris is what we consider pre-production. Somebody is on there scoping out the work necessary before it moves into production. But what's in active production right now?
We're in the danger zone here now.
Yeah, we thought I'm going to slowly do it and look at John as okay. So there's Redacted that's on Josh.
Yeah.
There's Adam. Will I talk about that one?
I'm trying to think what Adam's doing.
Spirit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Too late. Too late now.
I was pretty sure that one was safe. So we've got the Spirit in. What else do we have?
SLV just finished.
Just stressing over here.
Design.
Yep. Obviously.
Hull C.
Yep. Hull
just
C.
at the end. In its final teething.
We've got some more Redacteds that are on Chris.
Variants.
Well, what else is it? What the US work?
X1.
What's the US?
X1's about to start. On the
Thankfully, that's had a little bit of work done there already, but
yeah, the Storm is storming through.
He did it.
Oh. No, it was in the segment. It was in the episode yesterday. The Storm is turning through. Yeah. No, we actually we missed the narrative that it's, again, some of the things that missed through. It's like, in case you guys didn't catch it from the episode, the Temporal Storm is in a concept promotion right now as part of Invictus, but it is already in production with the LA and it's looking good. That stuff you saw at the end, that was not concept art. That was the actual white box and the gray box stuff. It's looking great so far.
They're doing Santok.
I wonder if they'll try to slip the Storm into 3.20.1.
We'll be updating for the we're showing you an update on the Santok Yai for Alien Week in just a few weeks.
Montreal are working on some variants of an existing ship. I'm just trying to mentally go around the floor.
Pretty sure it's all of them.
Retaliator stuff we're doing, we talked about before.
G12?
G12 will be going... So in the next year, backlog ships that will be going into production, caveat, things can always change.
Always change, John.
Polaris, Apollo, G12, Raylan.
Okay, see, that's oof. The G12, the Apollo, and the Raylan all going into production in the next year is like too much excitement. I don't know about that. Although, one of the ships that they talked about on the last monthly report, I'm really, really hoping was the G12 series, and I forgot that they had mentioned it here, so maybe it is. Yeah, the supposedly the team that's working on the Santok Yai will move on to the Gattac Raylan, which I guess makes sense. They're doing the Xi'an ships. But the Apollo would be a good addition for sure. And the G12 would be great to see another ground vehicle coming out of the backlog to get that out of the way.
I'm noticing something conspicuously absent.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Ban.
So we'll talk about the merchantman briefly, because we discussed like how we want to do the backlog of capital ships. So we want to start with RSI, because doing the Polaris first helps reduce the amount of work needed for the Perseus and the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
So those three will likely be like a chain of dependencies from each other.
Kind of shared assets.
Yeah, there's a lot of shared assets between them. Obviously, the exteriors are like quite different, but you do an RSI hull kit or corridor kit, floor kit, doors, beds. Yeah, it all gets reused across them, maybe with some slight material differences. So there are a few things that are problematic with the BMM. Firstly, everything is unique. Everything. So it's not like we do one corridor kit.
It can't be modular.
Yeah, it can't be modular. It has to be unique.
Yeah.
Nothing on the ship can be modular. Every corridor,
everything's unique. So
that kind of same thing applies to the Raylan. So I'm inclined to agree with you, Waffle. I wonder if they have something else going on with the Raylan that means they can do that and not the merchantman.
The amount of time investment.
I mean, there's some chat.
I guess the game features themselves would be different for the two.
So they molded something.
Yeah.
Right. There's
so like
lots of bespoke
everything. It was
I like burgers and pizza. Can't make me make that choice. Come on now.
So yeah, we had a lot of people on there. We had some unfortunate people leaving, which they'd been here quite a while, so we'd lost a lot of sort of that team knowledge and part of rebuilding the team. Obviously, effectively, again, like we said, you don't get new staff members go, hey, welcome to the Banner Merchantman. Here's a thing that does not follow any of our existing art guidelines.
Yeah.
And all the time we would have put into that would be just for that ship. We get no reuse from it. So yes, we will do it again. But personally, I think the time is better spent on other capital ships to get people up to speed, and then we can start putting people back on it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of love within the team for the Merchantman. I think it's...
Except for the picture Mark took a bit.
Yeah, apart from...
There's the FOV on that.
I'm never going to hear the end of that, am I?
No.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement there for it. It's just making sure that, again, like we said, that the team's set up to succeed with it and we can actually deliver it to the standards that we expect.
Can you imagine training new people on developing a brand new art style for a ship? Because I generally think Merchantman's going to be one of the hardest ships we ever do, just because of all the additional factors that involve the scale of it, the fact that nothing is really reused. It's all unique molded, all the rooms, all the floors.
It's a different art style of modeling as well, right? In terms of our like actual discipline of like how we make ships.
More organic.
Yeah, it's like more like traditional vehicle modeling, like than it would be like a hard surface.
Yeah, it's hard surface meets organic, and
it's automotive.
I say we'd worked on that process and we had a good process in place. It was just unfortunate that someone chose to go off and chase new adventures, and we wish them the best in luck, and it was a big loss to the team. But that initial kind of pre-production was done and it's there. It's just we just need to get to the point where we can still deliver our current line of ships we want to deliver, and we want to be able to do it justice, and it just takes a bit of time.
Wonder if they're really staying away from Squadron spoilers by not bringing up the Raylan in this discussion, because they're, Banu Merchantman is a spectacular ship, and it's a big one, but so is the Raylan. Let me pull that one up for you guys, for those who don't know what ship we're talking about here. The Raylan is a Xi'an cargo ship, pretty big, it's pretty large. It's got turrets, it's got anti-grav technology, it's got missiles, and a whole bunch of sort of custom assets. And you can see here, even the cargo pods in the back are these triangular special cargo assets that might work a bit differently. We don't really know how those are going to be implemented, but you can get an idea of the scale here with the person and entering through the hoverpod entrance. It's a pretty large ship. It's got some very cool styling to it. I mean, it's beautiful. Can't deny that. It is a beautiful ship. It's just a matter of what makes this easier than the Merchantman? And as somebody said, maybe the assets from Squadron 42 that they have to use for the Xi'an ships are something that they can bring over to this one. Maybe it's the difference in the materials and organic design of the Banu one. But they are definitely not talking about the Raylan here for whatever reason. That about wraps it up, though. The Raylan is similar to the C2 in size. It's an interesting one. A lot of these ships actually end up being very... the scale, you just don't get a sense of the good scale. I mean, look at this ship. It looks massive, right? I feel like I come across the same problem when I look at the Perseus, I believe it is. See, this ship, I always thought was so much bigger than it was. And then if you look up the stats for this ship, it's actually not that massive. So sometimes you can get thrown off by the scale when you're just looking at concept images. I guess the Raylan is not as big as I thought it was. So overall, that's a lot of the news coming from ships coming up soon. We've got things like hover mode that they're talking about, VTOL, ship tractor beams, modularity, physicalized damage, ships inside of ships, docking, and even we got some good gold pass updates and updates on which ships are being worked on. That was a little bit of an extra in there. But yeah, this was the review of kind of where ships are headed.